Hello and welcome to Nintendo Agenda. Today we'll be talking about the future plans of Nintendo in light of the recent Nintendo Direct. This is just a static picture here, so you don't have to watch the video. This is more like a kind of podcast type deal again. I've talked in the past about I think that the transition that Nintendo is going to go through from this generation to the next is going to be kind of like Game Boy going to Game Boy Color. We'll see if that's true or not, but that's the way that I think that they're going to approach it. This was a pretty good direct, and there was a lot of stuff in here, and it shows. I mean, why even need a new Switch anytime soon? Because, currently, there's a lot of games still coming. And there was stuff that wasn't even shown at this Direct that I'm sure that they're still holding on to. And this video is going to talk about what they did show and what they didn't show. The first thing that I noticed is that this was the first Direct that they had where they didn't give a warning about or excuses or delays about the CCP flu, or COVID-19 or whatever you want to call it, like they have for, it seems like years now. This is the first time that they introduced a presentation or a Nintendo Direct of any type where they did not say that. I don't know if this is them finally admitting, hey, that's no longer a problem for them, although I don't think it's been a problem for them, really, because we know that they've been sitting on things, and they're just waiting for specific times to release information or to launch the particular piece of software. Like, we knew that they've had this Everybody 1-2 Switch. We knew that they've had this, the Metroid Prime 1 remaster. We knew that they had a lot of games. They've probably most of the games that they announced in this Direct, they've been sitting on for a while. So the next thing that I noticed is that they start off with Pokemon, and then they also give more Pokemon information later in the Direct, in the way of Detective Pikachu 2, the game. And that's kind of, usually that's saved for Pokemon Presents. So either we're far away from another Pokemon Presents, or they wanted to get this information out there, and the Direct was the only way that they saw to do this at this time. And that's kind of odd to me because, again, these are usually things that are saved for the Pokemon Company to do separately. They're usually not in Directs. So I don't know if they just wanted to rush this information out there. And maybe part of the rush is that they wanted to get this information out of there before they start getting into other nitty-gritty stuff later on about possibly a new Switch or this, that, or the other. So, but again, that goes back to the point that was made before: is a new Switch even needed? Some would say yes, some would say no. I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of less about the gamers, although that's very important. The actual mind share of where Nintendo stands with people. And more about how Nintendo is probably looking at it. And Nintendo is probably just stuck in a weird place because they obviously want to make the current Switch last as long as possible. They even announced some things that are not on this infographic here for a new Peach game and a remake of the 3DS Luigi's Mansion 2. And more of that kind of stuff they're probably sitting on, or will probably still continue to be made, especially if the next Switch is backwards compatible with the current Switch, which I think is a no-brainer, but who knows? It would be nice to hear some kind of confirmation of that this year, even if they don't announce the next Switch. But we'll get into that later. But they were announcing stuff that was going into 2024, and so they're gonna continue to support the Switch for a very long time, even if they were to announce the next Switch tomorrow, or the next hardware tomorrow. I don't think that they're going to, but so that argument is not really trying to argue whether they should or shouldn't, or when they will or when they won't, from a new Switch versus the current Switch. It's just a matter of early before this direct even happened, which kind of quickly came. And yes, there were rumors about what would be in the direct, and yes, there was rumblings, but not as much as I think Nintendo just quickly got this out, which is good. And I think that could be an indicator too of what they'll do in the future. They want to hold the stuff so close to their chest until they're ready to reveal it. And they don't want to announce something and then it be years later before it actually launches, or before we get more information on it, like Metroid Prime 4. They don't want it to be a situation like that. They want it to be like, hey, it's done, we're sitting on it, nobody else knows about it, and then boom, here's a surprise announcement for it. And then it launches right away. Or, soon after they have a direct or an announcement for it. And that's great, in my opinion. That's more surprising. There's so many surprises that are ruined. There's so many things that are leaked these days. And, I think that's for a company like Nintendo especially, it's a concern. But up until this direct, a lot of people were like, oh, they ain't got nothing, so they're going to have to release new hardware soon. Or, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that there was a lot of things that Nintendo still hasn't announced. And I'm going to go over now what wasn't at the direct. These are things that are, announced that we already know exist, and plus things that are very heavily rumored to be coming. Now, whether it's to the current Switch or to the next Switch or to both, unknown at this time. But the big one, of course, which I already mentioned before, was Metroid Prime 4. Wow. I mean, it's one of those things where it really makes you think. I think part of Metroid Prime 4 might be that maybe they're holding on to it and trying to make it for the next system, or make it cross-platform, because, they already promised it to the Switch, and make it to where it'll be the next Switches, or at least for the franchise, for the Metroid franchise, it'll be its Breath of the Wild. A reinvention, big pulling out all the stops, the big hoopla for it. Could be wrong about that, but I think that Nintendo would love it if they could have Metroid be a bigger franchise for them to milk, and for them to push. And Zelda had struggled for generations, it seems, until Breath of the Wild, and now all of a sudden it's a top tier franchise again, and that's good for games, that's good for the series, that's good for Nintendo. And it was certainly good for Switch, because it seemed to coincide with the success of the Switch too. Also, I should say. So maybe the next Switch, they may aim to make Metroid Prime 4 a part of that. And I have all kinds of theories about Metroid Prime 4 and all that. But then, other things that weren't announced, that are rumored, or other things that weren't shown at the direct that we know have been announced and or rumored heavily. There's the Metroid Prime 2 and 3. Are they planning on releasing those before Metroid Prime 4? I would hope so, but then that means that Metroid Prime 4 is even further out. But, we'll see if they actually do a Metroid Prime 2 and 3, either as a collection like they're doing with Pikmin 1 and 2 before Pikmin 4 comes out, or as, how they did Metroid Prime 1. I'm not too sure exactly how they would do it. And same thing goes for the other rumored Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD. These are games that were on the Switch or on the Wii U that still haven't been brought over to the Switch yet. And I think these might wait a little while. These might go into next year, like many other ones, especially if they're ports, or especially, and that brings up the argument of why even have another Switch if there's so many of these games that they still haven't ported over yet. And do we need a more powerful Switch for something like ports? Another port that is heavily rumored is F-Zero GX. That would be easy for them to do. And the F-Zero GX was on a small user base of the GameCube, and it still sold okay. Last really big F-Zero game. And since then, they haven't really done much with the franchise. Another port would be Xenoblade Chronicles X, which heavily rumored as well. So, this is stuff that they could announce that they're holding on to, or it's heavily rumored that these things are made. These things are being made. That could be on the existing Switch. They don't, maybe F-Zero GX, if they really want to push the graphics of it as a selling point for a next Switch or for the game itself, then maybe it might wait for that. But I think the larger user base of the current Switch is what they're aiming for with a lot of these ports. But, could be wrong. Then there was, lots of rumors about a new Mario, 3D Mario. We knew the rumors of the new 2D Mario, and that they wanted to get that out sooner, or probably before the next 3D one, because of, the Mario movie and Mario Mania and stuff like that. And, we already know that's coming. That's probably going to be their biggest title this holiday, even though it's coming out in October, and even though they didn't announce anything for December. I still think that they're holding on to something for that. And then, but I think that a new 3D Mario might be something that they hold back for the next Switch. Same thing with new Donkey Kong. There's rumors of a new Donkey Kong. Could be for the current Switch, or it could be for the next Switch. It could coincide with a Donkey Kong movie if that's what they want to do. But we'll see. And then there's a lot of third-party games that are rumored. There's a rumored Resident Evil on Switch. Still hasn't come. It may be one of those things that they hold on to for the next generation or the next Switch. Genshin Impact, which there's rumors abound that Sony paid to prevent that from showing up on Switch. But they still announced it for Switch. And when they've been questioned about it, they say, oh, yeah, it's still coming. But we haven't really heard much since. And it's a big franchise. And it can run on the Switch. It's just, for whatever reason, they haven't brought it over yet. There's Mortal Kombat 1 and Hogwarts Legacy. Those have both already been announced. And those probably will not be cloud games. But they didn't show up at this Direct. So maybe they're holding it out for a third-party Direct later on, although there were third-party games at this general Direct, which, there usually are. Like Star Ocean and the Metal Gear Solid collection. Those are kind of a little bit surprises for me. And then there's Call of Duty. Now, pushing aside all of the Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard BS, we do know, if you follow Dr. A81, that he's found through LinkedIn that there are alumni from Nintendo, probably from Retro Studios, working with Activision on a special Call of Duty for the Switch. Whether Microsoft's going to push this through, or whether Activision, if they are smart would go ahead and do this to capitalize on the Wii's or on the Switch's user base. You know, that we don't know, but we do know that they are working on something. Is it for the next Switch? Maybe even, I don't know. But it's there. The team is close to Retro Studios in Texas, so you know that's a thing. So these were things that were not shown off at the Direct that we know have already been announced or heavily rumored. So that shows you that there's still lots of life left in the Switch if these are all for current Switch. But I would say it's about half and half. I'd say half of these, you know, like ports of older games, you know, things that have already been announced for the current Switch are coming to the Switch. But some of these could be cross or for the next gen Switch. But you know what else was not at the Direct? There was no cloud games. In the last couple of general directs or directs that focused on any third-party stuff, there have been cloud games. A trickling here and there, and never really pushed too far other than like, hey, this is a bullet point of, hey, this is a game that's on Switch now, but it's on there in a way that a lot of people don't desire. And I saw cloud games and cross-platform games as kind of like the transition from Game Boy to Game Boy Color. There were those transitional black carts that worked in the original Game Boy and had color features in the new Game Boy. And I saw cloud games also as, you know, like Super Game Boy games with, you know, Super Game Boy enhanced features. They were regular Game Boy games, but they had color features on the Super Game Boy. I see cloud games, and I see possible future like 4K packs or some kind of downloadable content that makes the resolution or the graphics or like the assets better on the new Switch for older games. It's something like for Smash Brothers, they could make it to where it's a 4K patch. So that they don't have to release a new Smash Brothers, which I don't think will happen. They could do that with Mario Odyssey. They could do that with Breath of the Wild. The next Switch, if it's backwards compatible, they could have, for some of the bigger games, they could have performance-enhancing patches, you know. So, and that's part of the transition. And I saw cloud games as part of the transition too, but they didn't announce any cloud games. So maybe they're giving up on that. Which, you know, is probably in most people's minds a good idea. And also it could be a sign that, hey, it's coming sooner now because we're not doing any more of this, the cloud games BS. So here we go. Let's get started on the next gen. Not half-ass, halfway step towards it, but more like let's do it, you know. And, you know, with all the games that I mentioned before that did not show up at this Direct, rumored or announced or otherwise, it begs the question of which ones would be for the current Switch and which ones would be for the new Switch, which I kind of already argued as I, you know, listed each one. So that's something to discuss. So going with that, what wasn't in the Direct, what was in the Direct, what's their here's the speculation on the future plans, you know, because that's what we like to do here at Nintendo Agenda. I say we, but it's just me. And I still think that a new Switch is coming soon. I mean, the last of the big releases are announced. The 2D Mario, this Mario RPG, you know, but other big titles that haven't been announced yet, like ones that I've already listed or this, that, or the other, maybe they're being saved back for the next Switch. As time rolls on, we haven't seen anything about Zelda downloadable content, but that could coincide with the launch of a new Switch. But as far as downloadable content for Splatoon and for Mario Kart and for Pokemon Violet and Scarlet and Violet, that stuff is going to be winding down here soon. And also winding down is a lot of third-party stuff is going to be drying up, you know. So a new Switch is on its way. I just don't know how soon. I had speculated in previous videos that it might be holiday of this year that they launch it. And going with what I said before about surprise announcements and then launches, they could be holding on to that close to the chest, and you know, it's still a possibility that could happen this year. I think it'll probably be next year, and I'll give you a reason why here soon. But if it is this year, here's how it could go down. Nintendo has a rumored event next month. Now, you'll remember when all the rumors about a Wii or a Switch 4K or a Switch Pro a couple years back before the the one June or E3-ish direct, even though I don't think that there was an E3 that year either. What was this, 2021? Anyways, they, all those rumors going around it, and then it didn't happen. And then a week later, they dropped a tweet that the OLED was coming. There wasn't in the direct, even though it was something that coincided with the big announcement from the direct, Metroid Dread, but at the same time, it was its own little separate announcement. That could happen again, and that was in July, I believe, or at least it was shortly after this big direct that had Metroid Dread in it. So they could do the same thing again. Now, some people are thinking, oh, maybe it'll be OLED, like a Switch Lite that has an OLED screen. Maybe. Or it could be the next Switch. Or it could be nothing. This is just a rumor that they've got something going on in July. Then, Nintendo's going to Gamescom, which they usually traditionally don't go to. That's in Germany. It's kind of like the German E3 or the European or E3 if you want to get a little technical. They've obviously got new games to show up on the Switch. I don't think that they are going to drown that out by announcing a new console. Then there's Nintendo Live. They could say something for that, but I don't think so. I think that they're going to push. The big thing is going to be the Super Mario Brothers Wonder, and I think that they're going to that they're going to market it like they did, or like what would happen with the Wii. The Wii, at the time that New Super Mario Brothers Wii came out, most people counted out the Wii as dead, and but that game comes, and 4 million Wiis were sold that December after the launch of New Super Mario Brothers Wii. That still hasn't happened since. No console has done that. And yes, though Wii faded and kind of flew off a cliff after that, but the Wii was a phenomenal performing console in the beginning. A lot of people, there's this casual fallacy, and we can get into the whole discussion there, but I don't want to get too long-winded about that. I've already been long-winded, like I usually am. But I do believe that if they market Super Mario Brothers Wonder, like they're trying to push New Super Mario Brothers Wii as the big game for this holiday, then I don't think that there will be a new Switch. If anything, and from my point of view, I think this would be the best thing that they could do, is say, yeah, there's a new Switch coming, but we're not going to announce it now, or we're not talking about it now. Or they'll say something along the lines of, yeah, we know it's coming, We're not talking about it now, but this is something that we will say. All your games that you're getting now will work on it in the future. It's backwards compatible. If they were to do that, I think a lot of people would be relieved, because then they would know, oh, it's going to be like the Switch, but more powerful, and it's backwards compatible. Because that's what people want. That's what people want. They don't want something that's going to be crazy, where it's handheld only or a console only or something goofy like some VR goggles or something like that. Now, some people might want that, but truthfully, business-wise and mass market-wise, that should be as an option, not as like their main thing they go for. We don't want another Virtual Boy. We don't want another Wii U. We don't want another mistake, goofiness. All they have to do is just assure us, hey, it's another Switch, and or preferably that it's going to be backwards compatible with your current games that you got now. So basically, what they're saying is like, it's kind of like saying, hey, these new games that you're getting right now for the current Switch will also work on the new Switch. So don't like stop buying Switches and don't stop buying these games, because the real money is probably in the games. Even if they already predict that the Switch is not going to have as good a year as this year as they did in the previous year. Of course, it's in its seventh year. How could it? But who knows? Maybe they don't say anything about the next Switch, and they really do try to make, like with the Wii, Super Mario Brothers Wonder as their big system selling game for this holiday. They still haven't announced the big December game, and that's one of those things that leads to, well, maybe they will announce a new Switch, and maybe it will launch in December or November or something like that. And maybe the big December game will be the game, maybe it's cross-platform on both it and the next Switch, on the current Switch and the new Switch, and maybe it is Metroid Prime 4. Who knows? There's a lot of things that can happen in between now and the Nintendo Live event, and then the September Direct, which they usually have, and that's probably when they would announce a big December game. If they don't think that Super Mario Wonder, which, I think it'll be huge, but if they don't think that it's going to be enough to sell old Switches, then maybe they'll use it to sell old Switches and new Switches. Who knows? Then there's also the Game Awards, which, they could, like if they win Game of the Year for Tears of the Kingdom, then maybe they could come out and be like, oh, and here's a surprise. I am not a Game Awards type person. I mean, I watch them every year just to critique them or whatever. But it's not really something for Nintendo news. They've kind of snubbed Nintendo, and they always see Sony as the big thing, which, in the industry it is, but, that's beside the point. Well, what I'm talking about here is would they reveal a new Switch, and how quickly from the time that they announce it to when they launch it. That means they would have to be announced pretty soon if they launch it this year, which, I'm kind of 50-50 on whether they would launch it this year. I think what's more likely, though, is that they're going to milk Super Mario Brothers Wonder and whatever their big December game might be, and play out Gamescom, play out Nintendo Live to promote this. Play out the next big Direct in September, if there is one, which I'm sure there will be, and the Game Awards, and just milk it, and then start the rollout process early next year for, Now, it was a good 6 months between when they announced the Switch until they launched it the following year. But that year, the Wii U really wasn't performing very well. They didn't have a big holiday, system selling push. So they had the leeway to do that, and people were already done with the Wii U, so they were ready for whatever Nintendo was doing next. People aren't. The Switch is not in the same situation. The Switch is not in the same situation that the Wii was, and it's not in the same situation that Nintendo was in with the Wii U. It's its own situation, and it's still selling well enough that they don't need to ruin its holiday for a launch of a system next year. So it will probably be after holiday before they say anything, if it's going to be next year, or they're going to start talking soon if it's going to be for the holidays of this year. But, like I said, it's 50-50, and I'm leaning more towards next year now. Earlier this year, I would have said, no, it's got to be the holiday of this year. They got to strike while the iron's hot, while the momentum is still going, and they will still continue to support the current Switch as it is, thanks to backwards compatibility, thanks to patches that could upgrade current games to make them look better on the next Switch. I think that they will continue to support the Switch, whether the next Switch launches this holiday or next holiday even. I think they will continue to support the current Switch for a very long time, as long as it doesn't interfere too much with the output of the new Switch. So they don't want to spread themselves too thin. One of the greatest assets of the current Switch is that all of their resources are going towards software output on one platform. So that's one of its greatest strengths. They're not spreading themselves across two generations, nor portables versus consoles. So that's my thoughts on that. After this Direct was a really great Direct, and it really does show that there's plenty of life left in the current Switch. But this was my speculation on the next Switch. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you guys next time in the next Nintendo Agenda.